UFP, the United Federation of Podcasts.
Welcome to Franchise Fatigue, the United Federation of Podcasts, little podcast where we cover movies and sequels and remakes. And we discuss them for you with my good friend, my constant co-host, Zach Moore. How are you doing, Zach?
Brandon, I hate to tell you, but somebody's poisoned the water hole.
Somebody poisoned the water hole. Was it you?
No, it wasn't me. I had a snake in my boots, so it was not me.
You were a little too busy with the snake. Excellent. I am excited to talk about this. This is our first, kids-centric franchise that we'll be covering for the series. You know, up until now, we've covered lots of the wonderful family-centered entertainment of Halloween,
Pet Sematary,
Pet Sematary,
The Godfather,
Godfather, family-oriented pictures. Just in a different type of way. But tonight we're going for the family, as in family entertainment. And
it's definitely our first animated film, which is great doing this podcast that we can talk about such a wide range of movies, and that's what's so fun for Brandon and I. And also a fun part is bringing on new voices and guests, right, Brandon?
Yeah, we've got a wonderful one tonight. And it's actually kind of interesting how we ended up with this guest here tonight. So first I'll introduce Gabe Green. How are you doing, Gabe?
I am doing great. It's great to be here.
Excellent. We are so glad to have you. And we were talking a little bit of the story ahead of time, but we will mention it now for those that don't see all of our tweets. So Zach and I, we originally started this podcast, I guess it's about 10 or 11 months ago now. We started with a Halloween over on the Talk Film Society, which generated into our show, Franchise Fatigue. And back in December, when we launched the United Federation of Podcast Networks, and we were coming up with this podcast, we're like, Franchise Fatigue. And our co-creators of the network, Ken and Tony, were like, what does that mean? And we're like, well, we're fans of franchises, so we want to talk about sequels and remakes and stuff.
We thought we were very clever because we said, oh, it's franchise, but without the R because we're fans. You guys get it? And they were like, well, no, but if that's what you guys want to do, that's fine. So,
and that is exactly what happened. And then, 3 episodes into our recording before we launched, Zach tweets me. He's like, you know that there's a show out there called Franchise Fatigue that covers movies and sequels? And I'm like, what? So, Gabe, you are one of the creators of Franchise Fatigue. So we tweeted you right away, and we're like, oh my goodness gracious, this is crazy. So, but not only that, but when we launched, we were both covering Mission Impossible, so it was kind of really weird.
Yeah, that was rather surreal.
100%. Anyways, we're grateful that you didn't slap a lawsuit on us, and
I considered it, but decided not to.
I'm in Canada, so I'd have to. The most I could pay you is at Tim Hortons coffee. But it's good coffee. But I mean, that's about all.
I mean, to hear Canadians talk about it, that's probably worth it.
Glad to have you join us. This is just wonderful. We're going to be talking about Toy Story tonight as we lead up into Toy Story 4, which launches in just a few weeks as of the release of this episode. So we're going to be having 4 different guests on for each of the 4 different movies, so that'll be an interesting take. But I think that we have some interesting times ahead of us. But before we get into the main discussion, before we get into the trivia, Gabe, why don't you tell us how you founded Franchise Fatigue, and tell us a little bit about the history of your podcast and where the listeners can find it.
Yeah, so our podcast originally started as a podcast called Underrated, where essentially I found myself arguing for a lot of movies that I liked that other people didn't like online. And I thought maybe I should start a podcast to defend them. So me and my friend James, we started Underrated. And for about 2 years, we covered all sorts of films that we liked that weren't as well loved. And then, I guess a little over a year ago, we decided to revamp the show as Franchise Fatigue and kind of bring the same approach that we brought to the previous discussions and just go through franchises and just talk about the the whole series film by film, get into the behind the scenes, the making of the films, because that is so often so important into what the final product is, and just talking really in depth about just whatever stood out to us, the themes, the performances, the directing, just really deep into the filmmaking, and then the discussion of like the box office and the legacy of the film, and then just one thing that fascinates us both is just how a franchise will evolve over its runtime, and just the way different ideas can come and go with each new filmmaker. So just kind of trying to get the big picture with franchise films. And so we've been doing that for a little over a year, and we are currently on totally going blank. We just finished the M. Night Shyamalan's East Rail trilogy, Unbreakable, Split, and Glass, and we'll be starting the MCU, which is a pretty good sized series next.
That's a good way to fill out the schedule right there. Do the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it's
next 6 months taken up,
and then James Bond, and then Godzilla, and we're set for the next 5 years.
Yeah, just about.
Now, when you guys had the Underrated podcast, did you find that you were picking movies that like one of you liked and the other didn't, or do you and your friend tend to have similar views?
We have very similar tastes, but occasionally there'd be one where like one of us was really excited and the person watched like, that was okay, and those weren't as fun to record as the ones we both loved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's as I'm sure you haven't listened to all of ours yet. Zach and I tend to not always agree on some of the sequels. I tend to like the sequels a bit more than he does. I'm kind of one of those people that's very excited when sequels come out, and I tend to rate my ratings a little bit higher than Zach
I have much higher standards than Brandon, is what he's saying, basically.
Pretty much. I like to look at it as I bring the positive outlook to the podcast.
Yeah, I like that.
Anyways, right on, Zach. Why don't you give us some trivia on Toy Story?
Yeah, so Toy Story was released in 1995 by Pixar. It was the first film in Oscar history to be nominated for a Best Screenplay Academy Award, which is a big deal for animated films. Beauty and the Beast has just been the first animated film to be nominated for Best Picture just a couple years before this, and it was the highest-grossing movie of 1995. It had a budget of $30 million, and it took home worldwide $373 million. So very impressive return on investment for Toy Story. Now, it wasn't always called Toy Story. A potential early title was You Are a Toy. Playing off the fact that Woody has to tell Buzz Lightyear, part of this whole film is Buzz Lightyear coming to terms with the fact he's a toy. Now, it was the first ever computer-animated motion picture, feature-length movie. There have been short films and all the kinds of things like that, but this is a big deal, and the film required 800,000 machine hours and 114,240 animation frames in total. So it was a lot of computing power going on here. And people take this for granted.
So when you say machine hours, is that rendering?
Yeah, that's everything. That is as the computer is working, as the rendering, the exporting. People take this for granted these days because we get so much CGI in normal blockbusters, and every time you turn around, you see a new, full CGI movie. So, years to come, people might not appreciate Toy Story for what it is, but it really is truly a revolutionary movie animation-wise. And that being said, though, there are some limitations to this being the first animated movie. There are no visible liquids or fiery explosions or long hair in the movie because they just couldn't animate that, or if they could, it would take even longer time. So they kind of kept it simple. You see, like Andy and all his friends have like a kind of a short hair, and even Sid, and they're very similar kind of models. And you don't really see that many characters, and you don't realize it. You don't really care because the focus is on the toys. Or you think about it, you don't see a lot of human characters at that point because they don't want to fall into that uncanny valley, which they often do. Now, this is during the Disney Renaissance of the 90s. So Disney was pushing hard for this film to be, a musical, like most of the animated features of the time. But John Lasseter, the director and writer and kind of brainchild behind this, he was against the idea, and he felt the film would work better as kind of a buddy comedy rather than a musical. And so he and Disney, they reached a compromise, and that they would play songs at key moments, but they would not be sung by the characters. They would not break out into the song as we're used to in the mid-90s of Disney. And actually, the first true musical that Pixar would make was until Coco, just a couple years ago, as of this recording in 2017. So that's over 2 decades later. And of course, Randy Newman was the guy they went to, and he wrote the signature tune "You Got a Friend in Me." Right? I mean, everybody knows that one. He wrote that one in just one day. And we can talk about the music as we go here, but I actually kind of revisiting this, I forgot. Oh, he has more than just that one song. There's more than one song in this movie, and they kind of break into Randy Newman throughout. There's a couple other good ones too beyond that one, but no, as I said, John Lasseter.
I wanted to mention on that, Zach. I wonder if I don't know when they came out. I'm going to take a look here quick, but Tarzan, the animated Tarzan, was another one where it wasn't a musical. It was. They just had songs in it to express the emotions that were going on. Yeah. So I wonder if maybe it looks like my iPad died, so I won't be able to check.
Tarzan was 1999.
Mm-hmm.
So that was after this.
Right.
So I wonder if Toy Story may have had some influence on Tarzan.
They were drifting away from the musicals.
Up bringing that one to screen. Yeah, because I remember that was kind of a big deal when that one came out. That it wasn't, but they were talking at the time. They were like, it wouldn't have made sense for this, burly ape man to be singing, right? So,
yeah, they. I'm trying
was
to think
that
of
a
the
trend?
Technology.
Can you think of other films that did that? 'Cause, like Prince of Egypt, I think, did something similar, where like half the songs are not actually the characters singing; they're more like someone singing in the background.
Yeah, not off the top of my head, I can't actually recall any other ones.
I'm trying to think about the Disney chronology of the late 90s, and I think Hercules was like 96 or 97, and the characters singing that. And then there's Mulan, which is like 98, I think, and she sings in that. There's a lot of great music in Mulan. And as you said, Gabe, Tarzan's 99. And then Lilo and Stitch was, I think, the next one. I don't think there's any singing in Lilo and Stitch, but I haven't revisited that one very often.
Got Hawaiian roller coaster ride.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not singing in there, but
it's funny though, because when I was a kid, I was like, oh, they're gonna break into the song now, whatever. And then as I got older, like the songs are kind of my favorite thing about the Disney movies. There's a great Broadway show called Disney's on the Record. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but if you like Disney songs, I would check it out. And they went on tour, and it was basically like this pop, quartet, kind of reorchestrated and recombined a bunch of Disney songs. They go around, and me and my friends kind of discovered this in college when they came to Houston, where I live, when we were in college, and we were all really into Disney songs for like years after that. So anyway, it's just a cool another cool layer to the Disney experience, right? But yeah, getting back to our trivia, John Lasseter, as I said, he was kind of the brainchild behind this. So Woody and Buzz Lightyear were inspired by Lasseter's own childhood toys. He based Woody on a Casper doll that he had with a pull string, as they make focus of the film is Woody has a pull string, Buzz Lightyear has cool buttons, and he based Buzz Lightyear off a cool G.I. Joe, kind of a flashy toy of his childhood. So those were his two favorite toys, and that's what kind of spun out of this. Now, as for the casting of the characters, John Lasseter always wanted Tom Hanks to play Woody. And even in the early test footage, they used Hank's voice from Turner and Hooch, the dialogue tracks in that, and that kind of convinced Hanks to sign on. And what's interesting about his recording the dialogue was he only did it in his breaks between Sleepless in Seattle and A League of Their Own, which is 92 and 93. And then he didn't do any more between Philadelphia and Forrest Gump because he didn't want to do comedic roles kind of in the gaps of doing dramatic roles. He kind of wanted to be in the right headspace for that. So he didn't want to be able to switch back and forth. So I thought that was interesting. And that just shows you how long it took them to make this movie. He's recording these dialogue tracks like 1992, right? And the film doesn't come out for 3 years later. And the Buzz Lightyear part, he was originally going to be called Lunar Larry. That was one of the names they kind of toyed around with, as well as Tinny. Was going to be Woody's name, and that was a character in John Lasseter's short film Tin Toy. But they kind of revamped kind of the story there and rearranged it. Like he was going to be Woody was going to be a ventriloquist dummy, and so that all changed and evolved, and he turned to the cowboy that we went to know and love. But as for Buzz Lightyear, Tim Allen has said that Pixar really wanted Jim Carrey to voice Buzz Lightyear. Because it's the mid-90s. He was on top of the world back then. His Ace Ventura, The Mask, Batman Forever, Dumb and Dumber. Like, he was a hot name. And they also had the idea that they could have Paul Newman